Welcome to Darkspeak, where secrets never sleep, and the darkness always has something to say. Tonight, we invite you to enter the story. Thunder under the blood moon in the Lamb's Iron Mountains, a place where the mountains and forests are wild and covered with clouds. There is a family that once held land, power and words as heavy as gold, the Han family. That family has two young ladies, born on the same full moon day of the 7th lunar month. At the same time the red moon hangs in the sky, but the fates of these two girls are as different as heaven and earth. Yanor is the daughter of the first wife, raised in silk and luxury. The entire palace is as precious as jade. Wherever she goes, she is followed by servants. Her words, as light as the wind, also make the servants obey. The people in the area often compare her to a fairy descending to earth. As for her younger sister Tuat Dung, the daughter of a concubine, as soon as she was born, she suffered an unwanted fate. Her mother, a servant named My Lai, died immediately after giving birth due to postpartum hemorrhage. No trumpets or drums, only a faint waft of incense smoke to send her off. Legend has it that on the night the two girls were born, a red-robed magician from an unknown distance stood in front of the Han family's gate, pointed at the main gate and made a prophecy. On the same day, at the same time, only one life will be honored. The other life will take the life of the entire family. The red moon is a witness. Blood will answer. After the prophecy, she left. No one saw her face. All we know is that from that night on, the entire mansion felt heavy, as if something was pressing down on the tiled roof. Since childhood, Uyen Tao was taught etiquette, learned zither, calligraphy, painting, and was noticed by the officials in the court. She was arranged to be the daughter-in-law of a noble family, bringing glory to the family. On the contrary, Tuet Dung lived like a shadow. No one called her name with a caring voice. The servants avoided her like the plague. The elders looked down on her, and the younger ones bullied her. She was taught only enough to read the books, clean the warehouse, and wash clothes for the entire mansion. All because of that prophecy, because people feared. She was the blood of the family, but Tuet Dung was not as weak as she appeared. She learned to read and write from scraps of paper, learned martial arts from an old gardener who had been an old soldier, and learned medicine from an old nanny who had been kicked out of the kitchen because of dementia. Every day she survived was a day she nurtured a pain and a desire to find the secret of that blood moon night. When she turned 17, the disaster began. First, Uyan Dao's personal servant died in his sleep, his mouth open as if screaming. Next came the zither master, then the coachman, then another of Mr. Han's concubines. All died with the same strange sign, a deep red handprint on their left chest, as if someone had crushed their hearts. The Han family was shaken. People invited a shaman and held a big ceremony, but the more they offered, the more people died. Uyen Dao began to have nightmares. In her dreams, she heard someone calling her name with a silent cry. Every time she woke up, she saw footprints in the dry mud next to her bed, handprints on the white curtain as if someone had just stood very close. Then one night, when the full moon died, the sky red again. Uyen Dao's screams rang out in the middle of the night, waking up the entire mansion. People found her unconscious in her room, her hair falling out in clumps, her mouth constantly shouting, "Dung, spare me." At the same time, Tuet Dung disappeared from the mansion. Some said she had been captured and used as a sacrifice. Others rumored that she was a vengeful spirit in human form, returning to take revenge. No one knew exactly what happened. But after that night, the Han family quickly declined. The land was occupied. The servants left. Mr. Han went crazy. All day long he could only scream, "Don't kill my son," in the empty yard, and the survivors began to remember the old prophecy. In the Han family mansion, there were not only many royal physicians and servants, but also a strange sorcerer, considered the fate holder of the entire family. Her name was Du Thiman, a short woman. Her face was always covered by a thin veil, only revealing her sharp eyes like knives. Not long after Uyan Tao and Tuet Dung were born, Mrs. Man was invited to see the fate of the two children born at the same time. She sat in the middle of the altar, burned incense, told fortunes, and then made a prediction that changed the entire Han family forever. The first child, Uyan Tao, was a lucky star descending to earth, bringing luck to 3 generations. After hearing this, Mr. Hanya's expression changed. Even though Tuet Dung was his biological child, he immediately removed her name from the family tree and ordered her to be moved to the backyard, a place reserved for slaves. Although she was only 1 month old, Tuet Dung had to undergo a gruesome cleansing of evil spirits ritual performed by Mrs. Man herself. On the coldest night of winter, she was immersed in a cold lake behind the ancestral garden, then placed on a stone table in the middle of the ancestral shrine. Mrs. Mann sprinkled ashes, chanted spells, and poured magic water all over the child. Tuet Dung's weak cries echoed, lingering like the cries of a wild cat, then stopped. It seemed that she would not survive. That night, the whole mansion slept soundly, leaving the poor baby in the cradle in the middle of the icy cold yard. They thought that by morning they would just have to bury her body, but a strange thing happened. The next morning, Tuet Dung was still alive. Her face was purple, but her eyes were still wide open. Not a single tear, not a single sound. From then on, she grew up without illness or pain. Something in her had changed. Although she was not expelled from the palace, Tuet Dung lived no differently than a servant. Every time something bad happened in the palace, a broken jar, a dead chicken, a burnt lamp, the eldest wife Eng Zhong blamed her. Sometimes she forced her to kneel outside for hours. Sometimes she was punished by not eating, and sometimes she even ordered someone to beat her severely. Mr. Han Na knew, but never once stood up to protect his second daughter. To him, Tuet Dung was just a mistake that the prophecy had pointed out. Tuet Dung grew up with silent eyes and a silent heart, but from a very early age, she knew she was different. When night fell, she heard sounds that no one else could hear. The rustling of footsteps on the empty porch, a whisper in the cold wind. One night she saw a shadow passing by the door, but when she ran out, there was only the smell of incense and water stains on the ground. When she was young, she used to scream and call for help, but only received a beating from the servants. Later, Tuet Dung learned to be silent, learned to sit up straight facing the shadows that no one could see, like a survival instinct. 10 years passed. Tuet Dung lived like a weed growing by the wall. No one cared, but no one could stamp it out. One day she was assigned to follow Uyan Tao to the teacher's house to learn to read. Even though she was only allowed to stand outside, Tuet Dung's eyes observed everything without missing anything. Her ears remembered, her hands recited. The round and distorted letters danced. She learned them gradually with each session. When she got home, she picked up a stick and wrote on the ground behind the kitchen. There was no paper, so she used ashes. There was no pen, so she used her finger. After memorizing them, she erased them all, and the next day she wrote them all over. Again, no one knew that the disaster girl in the house was so bright. Tuet Dung never revealed it. She knew, someone like her, if she showed even a little bit of abnormality, she would be crushed. End in the gloomy darkness of that house. A fire was silently burning in her heart, the fire of an unnamed destiny. Teacher La Hong, who taught Miss Uyan Tao every day, had long since noticed a silent gaze that always followed every stroke of the words in the classroom. That gaze was the gaze of the little maid named Tuet Dung, the person that everyone in the palace only called with a commanding or contemptuous tone. At first, he thought it was just the curiosity of a disadvantaged child, but as time went on, he was more and more surprised to see that the little girl never missed a lesson, even if she was only allowed to stand outside the door. Once, after class, Teacher Hone called Tuet Dung over, pretending to ask a few questions about her background. The girl answered softly, carefully, as if afraid that a wrong word could bring disaster. But just by looking closely at those eyes, the teacher realized she was not an ordinary child. There was something about Tuet Dung that suddenly reminded him of Uyan Tao. The similarity in face, features, and especially in the gaze of people with noble blood. When he learned that Tuet Dung was the biological daughter of Mr. Han Na, just because she was a concubine's daughter, she was banished to a lowly status. Teacher Hong blurted out, "Oh my God, why is fate so cruel?" Teacher Hong was not an ordinary person. Under the brown robe and gentle smile of a village scholar was a person who was knowledgeable about physiognomy and fate. Compared to Mrs. Mann, who had given a prophecy years ago, he was even considered to have a penetrating gaze. Uyan Tao was born in luxury, with a bright destiny. As for Tuet Dung, a child who was excluded from the family tree, destined to be a servant in the government, her fate seemed to have been predetermined. But the more he looked at her, the more he felt something was wrong, as if her fate had begun to deviate from the old prophecy. And that became more evident after Mrs. Mann, the shaman who had guarded the fate of the Han Palace for nearly 2 decades, suddenly passed away. Mrs. Mann's funeral was held grandly. Mr. Han himself chose an auspicious day, set up a tent to worship as if sending off an elder in the clan. La Hong also came to pay his respects, but not only to send off, but also to meet Mr. Han privately. No one knew what the two had said. But after that meeting, things began to change. Tuet Dung, who the whole palace had once considered a bad omen, was unexpectedly allowed by Mr. Han to officially study with Uyen Dao. The news caused a stir throughout the palace. The servants whispered, the guests were skeptical, and the eldest lady Njiok Shuang was livid with anger. To her, it was an unacceptable insult to let the servant's daughter sit on the same level as her daughter. How could she swallow that humiliation? Njiok Shuang had never hidden her hatred for Tuet Dung. She saw her as a person who ruined her reputation, a dirty consequence of her husband's fall. She once told the servants directly, "Don't call her young lady. She is the daughter of a poisonous snake in human form. She should have been thrown out into the street a long time ago," in complete contrast to her cruel mother. Uyen Tao was gentle and yielding. Even though they were half-sisters, she always treated her gently, many times preventing her mother from scolding her too much. Uyen Tao was respected by the whole village for her virtue, her kindness, and for never raising her voice at anyone. People in the area often told each other the Han family was very lucky to have given birth to such a young lady. If the next generation had someone like her, the whole village would surely change its fortunes. But because they loved Uyen Tao so much, they hated Tuet Dung even more. Partly to please the landlady, partly because everyone believed what Mrs. Man said, that someone born under the blood moon would bring bad luck to anyone who came near. Tuet Dung, despite being Han's blood, still had to work hard to do all kinds of hard work in the palace. At the age of 13, she carried 2 full jars of water every day, chopped firewood with a blunt knife, cooked with an ash stove, and washed clothes for dozens of people. The little girl's hands were calloused, her back was full of scratches, but she never complained. One afternoon, when the sun was still shining, Nan Uyen Dao's trusted servant ordered Tuet Dung to bring a basin of water to wash her feet. She did not resist, simply because resisting would do no good. But when she bent down to lift Nan's feet, Tuet Dung's eyes suddenly stopped. On Nan's forehead, a thin red streak, like a thread of blood, was flowing down, a long winding streak, as if it had seeped from inside her scalp. She blinked, rubbed her hands. But when she looked again, the streak of blood had disappeared as if it had never existed. She knew it was not an illusion. That day, Tuet Dung's gaze made Nun visibly uncomfortable. She was leisurely sitting on the steps, eating a banana, turning to glare. "You there? What are you looking at? Have you never seen a beautiful person before?" Tuet Dung did not reply, only said a sentence softly, her voice even as if there was no intention of provocation. "I see that the space between your eyebrows is very dark. Remember to walk carefully so you don't slip and bleed easily." Laughed, rudely throwing the banana peel to the ground. She stood up, scooped up the entire basin of foot-washing water, and poured it all over Tuet Dung, soaking her clothes. Her voice was full of contempt. "You think that just because the shaman is dead, you can take her place? Don't even think about scaring me, you sly devil." After saying that, she pushed the wooden basin aside and lifted her chin and walked away. But just a few steps later, right when she was stepping down the steps, Nan stepped on the banana peel. She had just thrown the rain last week, made the brickyard slippery, and that slip caused her to fall backwards. A loud bang rang out. Nan's head hit the brick floor, making her hair stand on end. That the sound of crying, the sound of people running over. When she was picked up, Nan's forehead was covered in blood. Her head was wrapped tightly in bandages like an onion, both funny and miserable. But what was more worth mentioning was that from that day on, she began to look at Tuet Dung with different eyes, both wary and creepy, as if she had touched something unclean. No one knew about the incident except the only person she trusted, Miss Uyen Tao. When she heard Nan tell the story, Uyen Tao was startled. She called her younger sister into her private room, gently pulling Tuet Dung's hand. "Can you really foresee other people's fates?" Tuet Dung nodded, her eyes clear but tired. "I'm not sure. Before, I didn't pay much attention. I thought I was seeing things wrong. But recently, everything I see has come true." Uyen Tao sat silently for a while, then whispered, as if trying her luck, "So, now look at me. Do you see any omens?" Tuet Dung shook her head slightly, her lips pursed. "No, I don't see anything. Maybe you're still protected by heaven, but that was still not enough." Uyen Tao, who was naturally curious and intelligent, did not want to stop at words. She pulled her sister along to walk around the house, telling Tuet Dung to observe each person, one by one. When they reached the backyard, just as Mr. Han Na, their father, was walking out of the study, Tuet Dung suddenly stopped. Her eyes opened wide, her hands trembling slightly. "What's wrong? What do you see?" Uyen Tao asked, her eyes also following her sister's gaze. "I see, above my father's head, a grey smoke, thick as ash mist. It swirled around very strangely. Uyan Dao panicked, and asked hastily, "Is it a bad omen? Could it be related to fire? House fire?" Tuet Dung lowered her head, not answering, but her face could not hide her worry. Wan Tao did not wait any longer. She ran to stop her father, pretending to be concerned, and asked, "Where are you going, father?" "Father, go to the granary to check. The harvest season is coming. The merchants will come this week." Knowing where her father was going, Wan Tao immediately changed her coat, dragging Nan along, this time not to play, but to secretly follow. They secretly followed Mr. Han from afar. When they saw him turn into the hay barn behind where few people went, the two girls hid on the side of the house, huddled behind the rotten wooden wall, peeking through the gap. And then, what Wan Dao saw made her freeze. Her father, who was always solemn and noble in the eyes of the world, was now embracing a slender young woman, his mouth close to her neck, smiling. His hands caressed her like old lovers reunited. Wan Tao did not need to ask to know that the woman was not her mother. Her face was hot, but her heart was cold, so this was the reason why he always defended those who were unlucky. That promiscuous nature was in his blood. Tuet Dung stood behind, silent, not because she was surprised, but because this feeling, she had known it before. Mr. Han Na seemed to be repeating the same old story from 13 years ago. Also a secret affair, also a nameless woman, and then the birth of a child abandoned by the whole family. That time it was Wang Dao. This time the name was unknown, but the nature was no different. People in the area still say, all chili peppers are spicy. All girls are jealous of their husbands. At that time, it was not strange for powerful men to have 5 wives and 7 concubines, but Enjok Shuang, the eldest wife of the Han family, was a terribly jealous person. From inside the house to the yard, everyone was afraid of her, especially when her face turned purple. Uyan Tao, the eldest daughter, although she loved her mother and secretly stood by her, she had never revealed it to the outside world. At this moment, turning to leave the straw warehouse after witnessing her father's dirty deeds, she suddenly saw the children lighting a fire to roast sweet potatoes near the dry straw piled on her side. A thought flashed through her mind. Uyan Tao leaned over and whispered into Nan's ear. The slight twitch at the corner of her mouth suddenly made her face full of calculation. Just a few minutes later, Nan dragged a bundle of dry straw to the wall of the warehouse, secretly lighting a fire from the red embers in the children's kitchen. She didn't mean to really burn it. She just wanted to create a fake fire to force Mr. Han and his lover to run outside, revealing themselves. The fire caught the straw very quickly. The smoke billowed high into the sky. The wind blew towards the warehouse, causing the smoke to flow inside. Nan pretended to be panicked, shouting loudly, "Fire! Help! There's a fire in the straw warehouse." As expected, just a moment later, the wooden door opened. Mr. Han and the woman inside rushed out, their clothes not yet neat, both their faces red. It was unclear whether it was from the heat or from embarrassment. The servants in the mansion heard the news of the fire and ran over like a broken beehive. Buckets of water, raincoats, people calling to each other filled the yard. In that chaotic scene, Uyan Tao quietly observed the woman's face, a slender face, thin lips, furtive eyes. She remembered it well. Immediately after that, Uyan Tao went straight to the main courtyard and entered her mother's room. Gently and decisively, she told the whole story. Mrs. Zhuang's face changed from white to red in the blink of an eye. Her hand clenched the paper fan tightly, almost breaking it in her palm. "This slut, this shameless woman, daring to seduce my husband. I will have someone tie her up and bring her back. Let's see who dares to climb on top of me." Uyan Tao quickly held her mother's hand and said softly, "Mum, calm down. If you make a big deal out of it, people will say you are a cruel woman, blindly jealous. Think about it. In this land, how many rich men are there who don't flirt? If you want to save face and keep your father, you can't be too reckless." Uyan Dao's wink and meaningful voice made Mrs. Yong stunned. A stream of old memories suddenly rushed back. 13 years ago, there was also another woman who made her mad. Her name was Wang Dao, a beautiful, gentle maid who was pregnant with Mr. Han. The child in her womb was Tuet Dung. Everyone thought that Wang Dao died of postpartum illness, but only Mrs. Yong knew clearly that her death was related to her hand. No medicine, no care, only cold water and curses all night long. Once again, Mrs. Yuang stood at the crossroads of jealousy. This time, she did not rush to act, because she knew, if Uyan Tao had intervened, then she must have had a deeper plan than she thought. Perhaps because she died unjustly. Huang Thao Tuet Dung's biological mother carried the grudge of not being able to reincarnate. The evil spirit accumulated from that resentment did not dissipate into nothingness, but instead surrounded her newborn child. The shaman who had always served beside Mrs. Ngok Shuang was the first person to sense that evil spirit. That is why, in the past, she devoted herself to performing a series of exorcism rituals for Tuet Dung, in the name of protecting the family, but in reality, it was to help Mrs. Zhuang eliminate the consequences of the motherless child. Unexpectedly, after so many beatings, so many times of drowning, smearing with ashes, drawing talismans, Tuet Dung not only did not die but also lived strangely resiliently, making even the shaman gradually feel afraid. As time passed, Mrs. Ngok Shuang was somewhat comforted, because although the illegitimate child survived, he was still considered a servant. Mr. Han Na, the landlord Kim, always listened to her, never looking at Tuet Dung as a real daughter. That afternoon, Tuet Dung was busy washing clothes at the well. Suddenly hearing a loud call from the main house, wiping her hands on the hem of her clothes, she quickly ran up, knelt down in front of the brick steps, clasped her hands and bowed her head. Before she could understand what was going on, slap, slap, 2 slaps like thunder struck her face, causing her head to tilt to one side. Her cheeks turned red, and her eyes were momentarily blinded. Mr. Han's voice rang out like thunder. "You burned the hay barn, right, you bastard? Why didn't I strangle you to death that day?" Tuet Dung trembled, covered her face, tears welled up, but still tried to shout, "Dad, I didn't. I didn't go behind the barn, you still dare deny it. Someone saw you hanging around there with their own eyes. I almost burned to death in there because of you." Not giving her any more words to explain, Mr. Han immediately pulled out a bamboo stick hanging on the wall and whipped Tuet Dung repeatedly like a rain of whips. With each whip, her small body convulsed. Her mouth kept begging. No one in the house dared to intervene. Not even Mrs. Chuang, who was sitting there coldly observing. Mr. Han's anger was not entirely due to being wrongly accused. It was the humiliation of being caught red-handed. The shame that turned into anger because his daughter exposed his adultery. And most of all, it was to intimidate his first wife, to prove that he had not covered up for the evil offspring of the past. No one knew who had slandered, set a trap, or if he had deliberately found an excuse. But the one who bore all the consequences was still Tuet Dung. Ironically, that day Mrs. Zhong had just sent Tuet Dung to herd buffaloes in the field, in the countryside. Everyone knew after the harvest, all you had to do was let the buffaloes out to the field, and the herder could go anywhere for a few hours without anyone noticing. That was the reason why she had no evidence to protect herself. Tuet Dung was beaten until her whole body was bruised, blood oozing from her shoulders and knees. Mr. Han only stopped when he was tired. He ordered 2 servants to drag Tuet Dung and throw her straight into the kitchen like a worthless bag of rotten grass. For 13 years, this was not the first time Tuet Dung had been beaten, but there was something strange that everyone noticed. She recovered incredibly quickly. There was a time when she thought she was going to die, but the next morning she sat up and lit the stove. That was why no one in the house cared. There was only one person, who always quietly entered the kitchen after the beatings. Ngoc Lang, her half-sister, silently brought medicine to Tuet Dung every time she was injured. Those bandages and cheap medicine bottles were more precious than gold to Tuet Dung. She did not cry, but her heart was always silently grateful. This time was the same. After applying the medicine, Ngoc Lang leaned close to her sister's ear, whispering as if it were a secret. "This time, father intended to forbid you from going to study at Mr. Hone's house anymore, but why didn't he forbid it?" Tuet Dung asked in surprise. Ngoc Lang held her sister's hand tightly, his eyes deep but cold. "Because I kept a secret, and used it to exchange for the opportunity to study for you. If it weren't for Ngoc Lang's earnest dissuasion, Tuet Dung would have been deprived of the opportunity to learn, pushed away from the path she had always longed for." That night, in the flickering light of the oil lamp, Tuet Dung held her sister's hand, her moist eyes shining with wordless gratitude. Although they were not blood relatives, to her, Ngoc Lang was the only person in this cold house who had ever reached out to her when she was in the most pain. As for Ngoc Lang, that night, she couldn't sleep. The more she thought about it, the more she felt goosebumps. Tuet Dung's prediction about her father, about the grey smoke swirling above his head, had come true. She had said that there might be something related to fire. And it happened right at the hay barn. It was not Tuet Dung, but Nan, her closest servant, who set the fire. The intention was to fake a fire, to expose her father and that woman. but the consequence almost cost him his life. Tuet Dung's ability to see ominous things, was it real? That thought made Engjok Lang suddenly sit up in the middle of the night. The next morning she called her sister into the room. Her face was more serious than usual. She said, "Oh, I really love you, but I can't cover up like this anymore. I have to ask, did you intentionally cause the fire to make people believe that you have the ability to see the future?" Tuet Dung turned pale, and quickly knelt down. "Sister, no, I swear, I didn't set fire to the barn. How could I dare to harm my father? In this house, besides me, everyone hates you. There are people who want to frame you." Engjok Lang looked at her sister's teary eyes. She was silent for a few seconds, then sighed softly, her voice softening. "Okay, I believe you, but remember what I told you. From now on, if you see any bad omens in anyone, you must tell me first. Don't let it slip out to anyone else. If you reveal it, they won't thank you. They will only see you as an unlucky ghost." Tuet Dung nodded like a hammer. In this house, Engjok Lang's words were the only lifeline. That night, when the house had fallen silent, Tuet Dung had a strange and creepy dream. She saw herself standing in front of a tall cotton tree, growing alone in the middle of a windless wasteland. The moonlight seemed to bleed and shine down on the scene in front of her. 3 men were surrounding a woman. The sound of whips, beatings, curses, and mournful cries echoed in the deserted land. On the roadside, wooden clogs flew off, lying around, as silent evidence of the brutality that was taking place. The woman was beaten until she was exhausted, falling to the ground. When she no longer had the strength to cry, another person approached from the darkness. He held a razor-sharp knife in his hand, slashing the air with a spine-chilling whoosh. "Such a beautiful face. Let me put some makeup on you. ... Then the knife drew a long line on the woman's face. Blood spurted out. Screams echoed as if tearing the night apart. The others stood watching and burst out laughing, each laugh as if coming from hell. Tuet Dung woke up, her body covered in sweat, her heart pounding. That bloody face still haunted her eyes as if it had really happened. Was it a premonition, a memory, or was it some spirit coming to visit? She curled up in the blanket, her eyes wide open until morning. She didn't know why, but Tuet Dung had a feeling that woman was related to her own fate. Miss Louis held her breath, huddled in the darkness, her trembling hand covering her mouth to keep from making a sound. The moonlight had just risen from the clouds, shining down, enough for her to clearly see 3 strong men sneaking in through the back door, carrying sticks and a large sack. Each step, each creaking sound at the cracked wooden gate sounded like the call of death. Miss Lu knew clearly, if she was still in the house tonight, then the body in that sack could very well be hers. The horse-drawn carriage was in the distance, covered tightly with a tarpaulin, but with her experienced eyes, she immediately recognized the person sitting in the carriage as Mrs. Engjok Swong, the eldest wife of the landlord, Kim's family. Right next to her was Nan, her face bowed, but her eyes were filled with cruelty, so it was her. Miss Lu gritted her teeth, half in hatred, the other half in horror, remembering what Mr. Hung said in the afternoon. "This disaster of yours is related to a man." Now those words clearly came true. Miss Lewid did not dare to return home. The next morning, she took the horse-drawn carriage to leave the village, carrying with her the obsession and secret about the man who had promised to give her a roof. At Mr. Hung's house, after class, Engjok Ho was still worried. "Sir, do you think she is safe?" Mr. Hung put the fortune-telling back together, and replied in a slow voice, "The disaster has temporarily passed, but it also reminds you that your ability is not a game. Whatever you see, you must consider carefully who to tell, and when. There are bad omens. Telling them early will save people, but telling the wrong person will bring disaster upon yourself." Ngoc Ho nodded. From today on, she understood more clearly than ever. Her special ability was a double-edged sword. As for Mrs. Engjok Swong, when she heard the servant report that the woman had managed to escape the village, she smashed the teacup, her face pale with anger. "That fox. If it dares to come back again, don't blame me for being cruel." But what made her even more upset was how did someone know her plan in advance? In her mind, the image of the little girl she always despised, Tuet Dung, appeared. Although no one said anything, her intuition told her that that annoying thing was becoming a growing thorn in her eyes. From early morning, the whole house was bustling with people coming and going. The scent of NGO flowers and SOI flowers filled the hallway, mixed with the smell of incense smoke and the sound of gongs and drums, making the space in Mr. Kim's house bustling like a festival. Only Engjok was quiet. On the kitchen, she was busy carrying trays, lighting the stove, chopping meat, and wiping pots. Every time she brought it up to the main hall, she had to bow her head to avoid the eyes of the honored guests, because her status, even though she was the owner's biological daughter, was no different from a servant. She caught a glimpse of her sister Enjoklang stepping out in a purple brocade dress embroidered with plum blossoms, her hair tied high with a jade hairpin, her lips painted pink, her face radiant with guests. Everyone praised the beautiful, dignified, and kind young lady of the Kim family. No one in the crowd remembered the other girl, the same age, the same flesh and blood, born on the same day but standing behind the curtain, her hands still covered in kitchen smoke. That night, when most of the guests had dispersed, the oil lamps were still flickering in the side rooms and Joko hid in the back garden, sitting quietly by the dry well. This was the rare place in the house where she could take a deep breath, where the cold night wind penetrated her skin. It was also gentler than any cold gaze in the mansion. She whispered, "Today is my birthday," yet no one remembers. A drop of water fell from the corner of her eye, but before she could wipe it away, the well in front of her suddenly stirred. The water surface was initially as dark as ink, then suddenly lit up, reflecting the image of a woman wearing a white silk dress, long hair, and a familiar face. Under her chin was a long gash, as if cut by a knife. Enjoko's eyes widened. She stood up but did not run away. Her intuition told her this was not a strange ghost. This was the person who had appeared in her dream last year, the person who had been beaten, had his face slashed, and left in the middle of the deserted road. A voice from the well rang out, unclear in tone, like a gust of wind passing through her back. Ho ... Mother's ho ... I was once crushed, like you are now, but not everything will always be like this. Ngoc Ho took a step back. She wanted to ask, "Who are you, Mum?" But her throat was choked. When the time comes, you will know everything, but remember ... don't believe what you see on the surface. Even the person you think is the best could be the one hiding a knife in his hand. Then that figure disappeared into the water. The well returned to its usual silence. The next day, an unexpected event occurred. During a tea party with a guest from Tho Palace, Mr. Kim announced the date for the engagement of Enjoklang, the eldest daughter of the palace, to the eldest son Tran Duc Than, the son of a famous Chinese merchant in the area. The whole family burst into joy. Everyone congratulated and busily prepared. Only one person in that house felt something was wrong, because that morning, when she saw Tran Duc Than entering the palace, Enjoko had caught a glimpse of blood dripping from his palm. Enjoko quickly bowed her head to apologize, but her face, smeared with soot, sweaty and red eyes, made the young masters in the group slightly frown. One of them, second young master Tran Duc Than, slowly stepped forward, his eyes glancing over her as if looking at an object. Who is that girl? A servant? He turned to ask one of the group. Another maid immediately replied, "Yes, I live in the house. My name is Ngo Ho, the owner's illegitimate child, but I am not recognized as a young lady." Tran Duc Than raised his eyebrows slightly, his gaze lingering on Ngo Ho's face for a moment longer, but then he smiled faintly. "Very good. It is indeed a noble place, and the servant also has a proper name and surname." As soon as the words fell, the surrounding children burst into laughter, a contemptuous laughter, as crisp as broken stone in the cold night. Enjoko blushed and lowered her head, her hands tightly gripping the hem of her shirt. Her heart felt like it was pierced by hundreds of needles. Right at that moment, Enjoklang walked over from afar. She had just heard the story, and immediately frowned as she walked over, in front of the young guests. She gently scolded, "Everyone who comes to visit my house, don't make things difficult for the servants. After all, today is a happy day." Tran Duc Than glanced at Enjoklang, his smile softening. She was truly a noble lady, and her speech was also completely different. No one knew that Enjoklang had always tried to maintain a perfect image in the eyes of outsiders, but deep inside, perhaps she herself did not realize that Ngo Ho's existence made her unable to truly calm down. That night, the banquet officially began. Mr. Kim's house was brightly lit with lanterns, wine flowed like a stream, and the sound of music and singing echoed to the end of the village. Enjoklang, radiant as a painting, sat in the middle of the main hall next to her parents. All the congratulations were for her, the star of the party. As for Enjoklang Ho, she was still in the kitchen, washing the pile of dishes and chopsticks that were covered in water, and occasionally hearing laughter coming from the hall. Although she tried to hold back her emotions, her eyes were still moist without knowing why. When the banquet ended, everyone withdrew. The lanterns gradually went out. and Mr. Keem's house returned to the darkness, which was also the time when another strange dream came. She dreamed that she was wearing a white dress, walking barefoot through a dense forest covered in fog. The voice of Mrs. Thou, her mother, echoed from afar: "Ho. Do you know? Blood has been shed, and blood will continue to be shed. Your destiny, even if people erase it, heaven will not abandon you." She turned her head, intending to run after the call, but something black slithered across her leg, a headless snake, wrapped around her and hissed in a human voice, "Don't go any further. Otherwise, you will replace your mother to suffer an unjust death," she screamed, waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. In the darkness, she saw Mrs. Thou's face flickering by the window, her eyes filled with tears and resentment. And Joe Klang hid behind the tree, his hands lightly gripping the trunk, his eyes following the silhouettes of two people talking by the pond. Hour of Thai 3/4. Today, will he meet someone who can change his destiny? Master Hong's words kept ringing in her head, like a light but deep knife cut into her heart. How could someone like Ngo Ko, lowly, unrecognized, even considered a cursed person, be so favored by fate? Ngo Klang pursed her lips. Her hand that was clutching the hem of her shirt turned pale. She didn't understand why a feeling similar to jealousy suddenly rose in her heart, a feeling that she had previously thought she was the most tolerant person. When she returned to the main party, Ngo Klang could no longer maintain her usual carefree expression. She sat silently in a corner, her hand fondling an expensive porcelain cup. The young guests were still chatting and laughing, but she found it all to be like the sound of cicadas in summer, noisy and empty. Meanwhile, Mr. Keem stood in the middle of the main hall, holding a wine cup in his hand, laughing loudly. "Today is the happy day of my eldest daughter, Ngo Klang. At the same time, I also want to take this opportunity to find a future son-in-law for her. Whoever among you wins his favor, I will give him a big gift." As soon as he finished speaking, the group of noblemen below became excited. Everyone competed to invite Ngo Klang to drink, to sing, to exchange poems. Only Tran Duc Than, the elegant son of a district official, was not as enthusiastic as the others. He was sitting at the end of the table, his eyes occasionally glancing towards a figure wearing a simple brown shirt, tiptoeing to help the kitchen in the hallway. At the hour of Thai 3/4, about noon, the sunlight slanted through the areca trees in the back garden, shining on Ngo Ko's sweaty hair, making it shine like silk dyed with honey. While washing the foamy dishes, she softly hummed an old lullaby her mother used to sing. "Just live a good life, and God will love you," she muttered to herself. Suddenly, from behind, someone called out, "Are you Ngo Ko?" She turned around in surprise. In front of her was Tran Duc Than, wearing a blue brocade shirt, holding a paper fan, his eyes sparkling with curiosity and interest. "I see you are not like the rumors. Did you study with Mr. Hone? Can you recite a verse with me?" Ngo Ko was flustered, bowing her head deeply. "Yes, I am a servant. I dare not. No need to pretend to be humble. I know you are talented, it is just hidden." Their eyes met. One was surprised, the other was interested. At that moment, Ngo Klang accidentally passed by and caught the whole scene. The heart of the girl raised to be a daughter-in-law of a noble. A lightning bolt struck her heart. She did not know what that feeling was: anger, jealousy, or was it simply a silent fear that was rising, that he was about to lose his #1 position at that splendid birthday party. No one expected that amidst the lights, flower, curtains, and the bustling sound of flutes, a silent shock had begun to take shape. Ngo Klang held the wineglass tightly in her hand, her eyes fixed on the back of Pham Lang, who was sitting elegantly among a group of young men of the same age. Her heart suddenly arose with a strange feeling of jealousy, both smoldering and aching. Wasn't she the chosen one? A swan carefully raised by her parents, a lotus in a noble pond. And yet, why did his eyes fall on a dark-skinned girl coming out of the kitchen? Ngo Klang's mind began to turn with all sorts of calculations. At the same time, behind the kitchen, Ngo Ko was still wiping her face with her worn brown shirt. The last tears had dried, replaced by a light smile as she remembered Pham Lang's gentle gaze as he placed his hand on her shoulder and asked, "Are you okay? Are you burned? Let me get you some medicine." This was the first time a young man had asked her such a respectful question. At night, when the guests had begun to leave, Mr. Keem, in a drunken and excited state, called Pham Lang into the study. "Teacher Lang, you are a talented person, and have just passed the Wong Kong exam. You will surely make this land famous in the future. I have a daughter, Ngo Klang, who is both beautiful and talented in both music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. If you are interested, I am willing to marry her to you. Marrying a virtuous wife will make your career more favorable, and our Pham and Kim families will become closer. Pham Lang was startled for a moment. Although he knew that the Kim family was noble and Engjok Lang was beautiful, the image of the little girl sitting and crying by the kitchen still lingered in his mind. He only replied, "Yes, my lord, I appreciate this kindness, but I still have the Hoi exam ahead, so let's discuss everything later." A few days later, Engjok Lang quietly sent Nan to inquire about Pham Lang's family background. Knowing that the Pham family was not well off, she immediately whispered this to her mother, Mrs. Xuong. Mum, if our family married their daughter to a poor man, it would be a disgrace to the world. If he failed to pass, it would be even more humiliating. Yes, I think so too. But don't you like Ho? Ho is a bad student, only knows how to have fun all day. I don't want him. What about that girl? If she catches Pham Lang's eye, you'll lose everything. Engjok Lang lowered her eyes, a secret plan forming in her heart. I raised you for 17 years, not for you to climb on my daughter's head and neck. Your life is strange. If I can't kill her, I have to curse her to live, and not dare to raise her head. Mrs. Zhuang's voice rang out, eerily like the sound of a snake slithering in the night. Engjok Ho's heart felt like it was about to stop beating. Her legs were cold even though she was standing in the middle of a hot summer month. In the jar was something breathing heavily like the wind. The strong, fishy smell wafted out with the wind, making her dizzy. Engjok Lang was silent. Her eyes flashed with anxiety, but she didn't object. This made Engjok Ho freeze. What were they doing? Related to evil, and even she knew, also participated. At that moment Mrs. Zhuang turned around as if she sensed someone was peeping at her. In the moment her heart was pounding. Engjok Ho immediately lowered her head and hid in the bushes nearby. Not daring to breathe heavily, she waited for a long time, until the light in the warehouse was completely turned off. Then she dared to sneak away. The next morning, Mr. Kim's house was in chaos when he discovered a rooster in the coop with its throat cut, its blood drawn in the shape of an upside-down star in the backyard. The servants whispered in fear, "Someone has cast a spell on the house, it must be so." Mr. Kim was furious, but could not find any clues. Meanwhile, Engjok Ho's face was pale. She remained silent all day, as if she had lost her soul. That night, she quietly went to Mr. Hong's house. In front of the oil lamp, Ho recounted everything she had seen. Mr. Hong frowned for a long time and then said, "The jar you mentioned, if it is really a glazed ceramic jar placed in the forbidden warehouse, it is highly likely that it is a jar. Only a skilled sorcerer can do this, and it is used to trap vengeful spirits or train underworld soldiers. The cursed person will not die, but will be unlucky all his life. His body will live, but his soul will be locked. Being cursed since he was young and still alive until now proves that his life is greater than others." Engjok Ho turned pale. "Teacher, can I break the curse? It is very difficult. If you break the curse even once, you will be counterkilled, but I will help. From now on, you must not let anyone know that you saw that thing, and you must not be alone at Tai hour. That jar not only traps the soul, but is also a bridge to something very evil in the underworld." Suggestion for the next part. Engjok Lang began to be haunted, because since participating in the ritual with her mother, she began to have nightmares continuously, and even saw the ghost of Mrs. Thou Engjok Ho's biological mother. Wandering in the mirror, Njok Ho accidentally discovered an old letter from her mother, hidden in the ancient book of Master Hone, revealing the secret of the Kim family's origin and blood curse. Du Ho, humiliated at the party, secretly returned to seek revenge, but accidentally witnessed the unusual scene in the warehouse and was possessed by that spirit, becoming a tool for blood revenge. Mrs. Zhuang frowned, her eyes flashing with a familiar, calculating light. "Pham Lang, if he is truly a talent, then you should have grabbed him before that fox." She turned to look at the ceramic jar with a malicious gaze, her lips slightly curled. "His life is really great. The soul suppression spell, for 17 years, has not yet defeated him. But if I cannot destroy his soul, then destroying his love is also a way." Engjok Lang was silent. A trace of hesitation flashed through her heart, but then her eyes glanced down at the ceramic jar, making her shiver. Having entered the ritual with her mother, having witnessed the evil magic in the warehouse with her own eyes, she knew there was no way back. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Ho tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. Her ears still rang with the miserable screams coming from the jar, and Mrs. Zhong's words were like needles stabbing into her heart. The blood powder was what caused her mother to bleed to death. It turned out ... she didn't die because of her. She killed her mother. Ho's hands clenched, tears rolling down, not because of pain anymore, but because of hatred rising for the first time in her already weak heart. The next morning Master Hong arrived earlier than usual. As soon as he saw NGO Ko's dazed eyes and pale face, he guessed that something serious had happened. NGO Ko quietly pulled him to the corner of the garden and told him everything. About the jar, about the screams, about the confession of killing her mother from Mrs. Zhuang's own mouth. Master Hong's hands trembled as he listened. Oh my god. It's the blood soul sealing array. This type of talisman was banned hundreds of years ago. Only those who practice evil ways dare to practice it. The master hurriedly instructed, Ho, you must stay away from that jar. If it's true that she used human blood to practice it, then your mother's soul will be trapped forever, suffering so much that her resentment will turn into an evil spirit. If I guess correctly, that jar is not only trapping souls, it is ... nurturing a karmic retribution. That night when everyone was fast asleep, the wind blew in gusts, whistling through the window cracks. In the Kim family yard, the jar in the warehouse shook violently, as if it was about to break. No one knew, except for a blurry white figure standing by the well, long hair covering her face, bare feet, body covered in sores, eyes of hatred piercing deep into the warehouse. That whole night NGO Ko could not sleep. She lay curled up in the small room at the end of the row of houses below, the moonlight outside the window quietly shining into her still red eyes. Having heavy breaths, her throat felt as if something was stuck inside. Pain, misery, humiliation, and resentment. All those emotions now merged into a dark mass in her heart. Mum. I'm sorry. For all these years, I've lived without knowing who you died for, still believing that it was you who brought disaster to your mother. She quietly reached into the small bag tied to the back of her skirt. Inside was an old piece of cloth her mother had left behind, with only faint bloodstains remaining. Now she understood. That blood was unjust blood. The next morning, NGO Ko woke up earlier than usual, not to clean or carry water like usual, but to quietly go up the mountain to find Master Hong on the way. The sky was unusually gloomy, the wind blew dust, the trees swayed as if sensing something ominous. As soon as Master Hong saw the little girl's face, he frowned. Ho, you look different. Something happened, right? She knelt down, her voice choked. Master, I can't hold it in anymore. I want to know how to break the soul-sealing spell. I want to save my mother. I want to pay back everything they did to me. Master Hong was silent for a long time. In his eyes appeared a mixture of suspicion and regret. You still have a heart, Ho, but you have crossed the line of resentment. Remember, resentment can easily give birth to evil spirits. Only exercise evil. Do not sow new evil. NGO Ko bowed her head. Mrs. Cook heard Mrs. Moy speak and smiled awkwardly, turning the worn ebony rosary on her fingertips. I am a country person. I do not dare to climb high. My family is not rich, but we still keep human ethics. I do not dare to reach the place of power. Mrs. Moy saw Mrs. Cook's modesty and became even more pleased, cleared her throat and added, Don't worry. The rich people do not despise and even praise Lang for being good at studying, with a bright future. NGO Lang also admires him. It is truly fate. You should think carefully. But I am telling the truth. If a young man stays a virgin for too long, be careful. Someone will take him away. Mrs. Cook did not reply. She just silently looked out into the yard, where her son was diligently copying books under the starfruit tree. A feeling of unease suddenly arose in her heart, like a strange wind blowing through the trees, causing the dry leaves to tremble. That night, when the silver moonlight poured down into the garden, NGO Ko quietly walked through the back door to find Pham Lang. She did not dare to knock. She just stood outside the bamboo fence, calling softly. Brother Lang. Pham Lang walked out, surprised to see the girl with shoulder-length hair, her sparkling eyes as if containing the moon within them. NGO Ko spoke softly, as if afraid the wind would hear. Brother Lang, they want to marry your sister to you. Do you want that? The young man was momentarily stunned, then shook his head slightly. No, I only respect Miss Lang as a learned young lady. As for the person they want to marry is the one who cried behind the kitchen the day before. NGO Ko was stunned, her heart pounding in her chest, but her face remained calm. She smiled sadly. Then don't let others choose for you. There are marriages where the price to pay is not just a lifetime. The next day, when Mrs. Matchmaker returned, Mrs. Cook had an answer. I refuse. Mrs. Matchmaker opened her mouth wide, her eyes wide as she looked at Mrs. Cook as if she had gone crazy. But Mrs. Cook just clasped her hands in gratitude, closed the bamboo gate and said nothing more. The news reached Mr. Keem's house, making Mrs. Zhuang pale, and Njok Lang slammed his fist on the table, tears welling up in his eyes, screaming that Njoko was the one who sabotaged it. "Mum, she bewitched Pham Lang. I saw them whispering to each other in the kitchen with my own eyes." Mrs. Swang clenched her hands, her face pale. "Don't worry, if she is a thorn, I will pull her out, once and for all." Pham Lang did not expect his mother to suddenly make such a decision. He sat silently in the room, looking at the test paper in front of him, unable to continue reading, even though he knew Njok Lang was a noble lady and a beautiful person. But, in his heart, he always remembered the image of the girl with sad eyes quietly in the kitchen after that day. Ngoc Ho. That name appeared in his mind like a small ink mark on a white page, not bold but also indelible. He remembered her timid gaze, remembered her gentle but strong voice, remembered the tears falling on the damp ground. She was not a beautiful lady like Njok Lang, but a girl that his heart could not ignore. That night, Pham Lang made an excuse to go to the garden to pick herbs, then quietly walked towards Mr. Keem's big house. He stopped outside the fence, where he could see the kitchen door was still lit, and, as expected, Njoko was sitting alone by the dishwashing tray. "Miss Ho," he called softly. The girl turned around, startled. "Mr. Lang, why did you come here?" Pham Lang looked at her for a long time before slowly saying, "I heard. I'm going to marry your sister." Ngak Ho paused. She wiped her hands on her shirt, her voice calm but her eyes darkened. "Congratulations." "I don't want that." Lang's voice dropped. "I want to ask her something. If I refuse, can you help me?" "Who am I to help you?" Njok Ho smiled sadly, turning away. "You're the one who has made me think about you since the day we met." That sentence made Njok Ho's heart stop for a beat, but then she took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. She knew clearly the ambitions of Mrs. Zhuang and her son, knew clearly that everything was just a chess game, and Pham Lang and she were just chess pieces in their hands. "If you want to escape, then don't come to see me anymore," she said. "They won't let anyone stand in their way." As for Mrs. Swang, after hearing the matchmaker report that she had received Mrs. Cook's nod, she immediately sent someone to choose an auspicious day to bring gifts to ask for her hand in marriage. Njok Lang smiled all day long, but she was not happy in her heart, because even though she was about to marry the person she wanted, she still felt uneasy. Pham Lang's gaze when he left the party a few days ago, his gaze did not look at her but instead followed his younger sister, was like a thorn in her heart. Hearing Mr. Keem mention wanting to find a husband for Njok Ho, Mrs. Young was startled for a moment but quickly regained her composure. He was right. That child should not stay in the house forever, bothering her children and grandchildren, but when marrying, she must know where to get married. Mr. Keem frowned slightly. "Find a place a little further away. Don't stay in this area, or else this family will lose face." Mrs. Shuang smiled, her eyes flashing with cunning. "I know a family. The family lived in the other commune. They specialized in raising buffaloes, and were quite well off. Their eldest son had just lost his wife, and was in need of a successor. It was just a pity that he was a bit old, but that was more suitable. What kind of person like Ho was still picky?" The plan to marry Njok Ho off was actually a form of exile. The man that Mrs. Zhuang mentioned was not only old but also violent and rude, and had been known to beat his wife to death. But she knew that once she pushed Njok Ho out of the house, it would be like burying all the memories and grudges of the past. The news of Njok Ho's marriage spread throughout the house shortly after. When Nan was ordered to prepare a few old clothes for her to take with her, she sneered meaningfully. Luckily there are still people who want to marry you. I thought you would live until you're old in this kitchen." Njok Ho did not respond, but this time her eyes were no longer as resigned as before. She had been waiting for this day. The day that Mr. Keem and Mrs. Swang announced with their own mouths. Dad wanted to chase her away, so they were also at the point of being careless. That night, in the old room at the end of the garden, Njok Ho quietly took out the charms that Master Hong had taught her, a flying dragon and dancing phoenix characters on yellow paper. She took out a piece of old hair and a torn piece of cloth with dried blood from the silk bag hidden at the bottom of the chest. That was the only remaining relic from the first time she saw her mother's spirit appear. She began to chant, her hands shaking with anger. The years of living in humiliation, the wounds on her body, her mother's unjust departure, everything seemed to burst forth. "Mum, ... If your spirit is really still around, please give me a sign." At that moment, The oil lamp in the room suddenly flashed a red light, then went out without reason. The window shook slightly. A cold air brushed past her spine, making her shiver. From the banana garden, the sound of slippers clicking softly, long and heavy as if someone was trudging through the night. Although Mrs. Swung frowned, she secretly laughed in her heart. What was this brat thinking? Thinking that opening the door to welcome her husband was as easy as welcoming the wind. The house was on the edge of the village, who could come at Mui hour without prior arrangements. And even if it was arranged, it wouldn't escape her eyes. Okay, you'll keep your word. Tomorrow morning at Mui hour, I'll open the gate, whoever comes first, and doesn't have a wife, you must marry. I'll be the master of ceremonies. Don't be fickle. Mr. Keem just nodded, considering this a fun pastime. It had been a long time since his house had such a commotion that night. The Tran family was like an undercurrent. Enjo-ko lit an incense stick and placed it in front of the cold ash jar outside the warehouse where she believed her mother was. Still lingering in her hand was a piece of paper with Thao's name written on it, along with a few lines of the spell that Master Hung had taught her. If I am truly the blood of an unjust fate born from injustice, please let me borrow the strength of the deceased one more time. The wind from the banana garden blew in coldly. The incense flame suddenly bent as if it was being tilted. Then the ashes fluttered lightly. A white flower petal fell from nowhere. Meanwhile, Mrs. Zhuang sent her daughter Nan to find some unmarried men in the area, entice them with some money, and told them to try to get to Mr. Keem's house soon. She thought to herself, Enjo-ko wants to try her luck. I'll let you taste bad luck. But among the village boys, she didn't know that there was someone standing before the gate of fate. It was Pham Lang. Early the next morning, the villagers of Dong Exa gathered in front of Mr. Keem's house, as if watching a festival in Gokyo. Wore a light blue out there. Her hair was long and loose. Her eyes without any makeup stood out in the crowd. In contrast to Enjo-klang's splendor on her wedding day, today Enjo-ko only wore the old clothes that her sister had thrown away, but walked slowly. Her eyes were strangely calm. The village drum rang exactly 3 times. The hour of Mui had arrived. The gate opened. A man walked in. Not the clumsy guy that Mrs. Zhuang arranged. Not the group of village boys laughing behind the fence. It was Pham Lang. A black Dai. A straight back. A face that still had the look of a scholar, but his eyes shone with an unprecedented determination. Mrs. Zhuang was stunned. Ngoc Lang behind the curtain fumbled and almost fell. His face drained of blood. Only Injoho calmly walked forward, bowed her head slightly, then looked up. I beg to keep my engagement. The villagers were in an uproar. Some said it was fate, others gossiped that this guy was smart. Some were jealous. Some admired him. Mrs. Zhuang looked at her daughter, whom she had always considered an eyesore, now standing on the same level as the person she had once planned to marry her own daughter. Her eyes became fierce, but it was all too late. The question now was Mrs. Thao about to appear to support her daughter, or is there another soul, more cruel, waiting for the day to repay the blood debt for Mr. Keem's family? Mr. Keem heard his wife say that, and immediately softened his face. While he was still hesitating, Enjo-klang ran out of the house, his voice as sweet as honey. Father, it's a happy event. Just consider it a good deed. I think it's good to let her marry this person. Consider it as God's will. Every word Enjo-klang said was like a knife cutting into Engo-ko's heart. She smiled, bowed to everyone, then took the beggar's hand and left the yard without looking back. The commotion in the village soon spread far and wide. People whispered, Mr. Kim's daughter is extremely rich but married to a beggar. What a strange and unique thing. Seeing that the little girl is also beautiful, there must be something wrong with her mind. Or does that beggar have a magic potion? Mrs. Cook was also very surprised when she heard the news. Pham Lang stood quietly by the window, his hands clenched. Even though he had married Enjo-klang, he still felt a little uneasy, as if he had forgotten something precious in the storm. Meanwhile, Enjo-ko took the beggar to live in a small, deserted hut at the end of the village. No one understood why she was still happily taking care of him as if he were a relative. She did not care about the world, did not care about her poverty, just quietly lived with her newlywed husband, farming, gathering firewood, cooking porridge to share. But there was one thing that made the villagers gradually quiet down. After a few days, the beggar changed completely. His messy hair was neatly cut. His face was washed clean. His eyes were unusually bright. He began teaching the village children to read and write. Whenever someone was sick, he could take their pulse and prescribe medicine. No one knew where he really came from. only Anjo Koho every night sitting by the oil lamp, quietly looking at the man beside her, then softly breathing out, "I know you are not an ordinary person." The ghostly laughter last night was like an invisible knife, cutting into the cracked trust of those in Mr. Keem's mansion. The fire had been extinguished, but what was burned was not only the property, but also a part of the darkness that Mrs. Yong had tried to lock up in a sealed jar in a locked warehouse for so many years. Mrs. Yong rushed into the ashes, her hair disheveled, her bare hands digging into the ashes like a mad person. Her eyes were red, her face was smeared with smoke. She scratched the ground and screamed, "No, no. Thou, don't pull me down, I'm not afraid of you, You can't do anything to me." Outside, the villagers looked at each other. Some whispered, some crossed their chests. An old woman said with a trembling voice, "Oh my God, the jar that Mrs. Zhuang always locked. Do you guys remember hearing someone crying in the middle of the night a few days ago?" "Yes. One day I saw someone sitting in front of the warehouse door. I thought it was a servant girl." But Mr. Keem's face turned pale when he heard those words. He didn't say anything, just clenched his fists, then turned and walked inside. He knew very well what was kept in that warehouse, not gold or silver, but secrets and resentments. As for Ngokho, since she became independent, she lived a simple but peaceful life. The people were wary at first, but when they saw that the beggar from that day suddenly changed strangely, he knew how to farm, how to cure diseases, and could even read Chinese characters, they began to show respect. Children called him the ragged-clothed doctor. Adults came to ask him to take their pulse, diagnose illnesses, and show them how to pray to the stars to ward off bad luck. The hut in the middle of the field was increasingly lit up at night, with people coming in and out in droves. And Joko was still the same, quiet, patient, taking care of her husband with every meal, every cup of water. But every night, she would sneak out to the backyard to light an incense stick facing the village, whispering, "Mum, am I doing the right thing? That person, is really the person you sent." One rainy night in early July, the beggar suddenly said, "Oh, tomorrow I have to go up the mountain." Ngoc Ho was surprised. "Why are you leaving?" He smiled. "There is something that needs to be paid, a debt from a previous life. Only when I face it, can we both live in peace." Njok Ho looked deeply into his eyes, and for a moment, she saw the figure of another person, tall, dignified, with eyes that looked as if they had buried an error. Njok Lang stood there in a daze when he heard his sister say that, his face pale as if there was no blood left. She did not expect that after all the calculations of her mother and son. In the end, the illegitimate child that they despised would be the one to reach out to save the whole family. Mrs. Cook was not grateful when she heard the news, but on the contrary, she was even more worried. In her mind, she only thought about the family's reputation and Famlang's future. The fact that her parents-in-law were in trouble with the law and now they were released, but that bad reputation was still like a thorn in her husband's family's reputation. When Mr. Keem and his wife returned, both of their faces were visibly haggard. Mr. Keem became less talkative and quieter from then on. Mrs. Wang, on the other hand, was like a person who had lost her soul. Every night she would startle and call out Mrs. Thou's name, as if her ghost was still haunting her. Once, Njok Ho heard a servant recount that in the middle of the night, there was the sound of water flowing in the ruined kitchen. At every hour of the hour, people would see the shadow of a woman with long hair and a pale face, standing staring into the house above. The faint-hearted did not dare to come near her anymore. Mrs. Swang began to lose sleep and eat irregularly. Sometimes she would sit alone for hours, giggling and muttering, "No, it wasn't me, it was Mrs. Dong, Mrs. Dong told me to do it, Then suddenly someone from the next village came to report, Mrs. Dong, the one who had practiced magic spells, with Mrs. Zhuang, had hanged herself in a thatched hut in the middle of the deserted forest. Her body was as dry as rotten wood. Underneath was a bowl of diluted blood and a clay statue of a broken human head. That news made Mrs. Zhuang collapse. From that day on, she was like a person who had lost her mind, calling everyone, "Thou forgive me, I didn't mean to." Njo Glang secretly visited her mother many nights, standing behind the wall watching Mrs. Zhuang mumble while tears kept falling, but she did not dare to go in. She understood that the karma her mother had caused had now become a chain that bound the whole family. No one could escape. As for Njo Cook, the villagers now looked at her with different eyes, although they still had some small gossips. No one denied that she, the one who was once considered a disaster, was the one who shouldered the burden and paid off the family's debts. And Ho lived in a small hut in the fields with her mysterious husband from years ago. Strangely, since leaving the Tran family, she was no longer as miserable as people thought. Although her husband was dressed in rags, he was actually a man of no ordinary status. The villagers had seen many times that a high-ranking official stopped by that small house, quietly discussing something with him. Then one day, after a big flood, the village chief's land records were all stolen, and not long after, someone came to accuse the village official of embezzling public funds. Strangely, those cases were later thoroughly investigated, as if someone was secretly behind the scenes arranging them. And Goko still kept her quiet appearance as before, only her eyes were brighter and sharper. People did not know why, but every time they saw her passing by, the village boys furtively avoided her, and the women secretly pointed at her. Some said she had learned a spell. Others rumored that Mrs. Thou's ghost had possessed this girl to take revenge. Hearing his daughter's decisive answer, Mr. Keem remained silent for a long time. His eyes contained many complicated feelings, the pain of someone who had just lost his partner, and had just realized that he had bet his whole life on a wrong game of chess. He forced a faint smile, his voice hoarse. You are just like your mother. That bravery, that loyalty. This old man has only seen it once in his life. Enjok-ho just bowed her head, saying nothing, but in her heart, a feeling of bitterness arose. The old father in front of her for so many years was the one who gave orders, the cold monument that made her afraid. Now she was exhausted, lonely and regretful. She knew that he had paid the price, and the price was not cheap. After Mrs. Zhuang's funeral, the villagers of Dongsha still gossiped. Some said that her death was due to karma. Others shook their heads in regret, because after all, Mrs. Yuang had been a skillful woman who had taken care of a fortune. But the more horrifying thing was that Mrs. Yuang's body, when embalmed, suddenly had countless purple bruises as if she had been strangled. Her face was wrinkled as if she was groaning. The midwife that day later went crazy, always mumbling Thou's name. Spare me. Mr. Keem's family became more and more ruined. The fields and gardens were abandoned. The house was deserted. The gossips never stopped. As for Enjo Lang, after marrying Pham Lang, she thought she would be able to rely on her husband's family to hold her head high. But unexpectedly, Mrs. Cook, her mother-in-law, was a meticulous and suspicious person. Seeing her wife's family involved in a murder case, and hearing the bad rumors, she became more and more critical of her daughter-in-law. Enjok Lang could not stand the suffocating life, and immediately developed headaches and cried at night. At first Pham Lang still loved her, but later he gradually became indifferent, because deep down he still remembered the girl who used to quietly mend his clothes under the banana shade. That was Enjok-ho. As for Enjok-ho, although she lived in a small house in the middle of the fields, strangely, she became more and more prosperous. The rice fields bloomed regularly, and every season was a good harvest. Her husband, who was once considered a beggar, was now a knowledgeable person, speaking clearly. Some people rumored that he was a student of a local scholar pretending to be poor to test people's hearts. Others said that the government secretly sent him down to investigate the case of the village officials and rich people colluding to exploit the innocent. But whatever the truth, one must admit, Enjok-ho's family was not as rich as the Tran family in the past, but it was full of laughter, delicious food, and harmonious marriage. A year after Mrs. Zhuang passed away, Mr. Keem fell seriously ill. Before he died, he called Enjok-ho to his bedside. His haggard face was now wet with tears. Dad, I owe you and your mother so much. If there is a next life, I hope to be a better person. Enjok-ho held his hand, choking. Dad, rest in peace. I don't resent, nor do I hate, because if it weren't for those humiliating days, I wouldn't have learned to be strong and resilient. Mr. Keem smiled faintly. His eyes closed. The light seemed to have completely gone out in those eyes. The eyes of a man who had just been forgiven after a lifetime of mistakes. From the day the two sons-in-law packed up and left, the whole Dongsha village suddenly became bustling like a festival. Every day at the market, I hear the vegetable vendors gossiping. Hey, think about it. Is Mrs. Cook's son Lang or Ho's son Van Haya? Oh my, no need to think. Lang is a rich man, well-educated, full of knowledge. As for that poor son-in-law, just yesterday he was a beggar. Hey, that's unfair. I heard that Van passed the Wong exam. He's gentle, hard-working, and Ho is also clever, marrying a poor man but has a good hand. Life. Only when the name is on the golden board will we know who has the best horse for the long haul. Time passed. News from the capital continued to pour in. After the Hoi exam, people saw a few candidates return to their villages early, their faces sad, their gait tired. By the 4th month there was still no news from Levan or Pham Lang. Still not back, Mrs. Cook asked, as she passed the Hoi exam. Njok Lang was restless, because after her parents were imprisoned, she no longer had much dowry to be proud of. If Pham Lang did not pass, her husband's family would be empty-handed. Njok Ho's small house on the edge of the field was still lit every night. She diligently wove cloth, carried rice, grew vegetables, and saved every penny to send to the capital for her husband. The villagers admired her very much. She's so good. She worked in the fields, took care of her husband's education, and even raised a dog and a cat. But she still didn't complain. An old woman in the neighborhood shook her head. It was because she practiced in her previous life. She was a mandarin's daughter but accepted to be the wife of a poor student, and was also loyal. Heaven loved her and bestowed her virtue. In the 6th month the court posted a golden plaque at the gate of Tai Hoc Vien. The whole capital was in an uproar like a broken beehive. Among the names engraved on the dragon board, the villagers of Dong Sha were dazzled to see Levan from Thatch Sha Commune, Dong Than District, Du Tam Giap, a fellow doctor. The news was like a whirlwind that swept through the village in one day. The sun that day seemed brighter than usual, shining brightly. From the field where Ngok Ho and his wife's small house was located, the villagers rushed to congratulate. Some brought betel and areca nuts, others brought wine. Even the old scholar was stunned. Who would have thought that the beggar from years ago would become a doctor? And thanks to whom? Thanks to that Ho. Heaven really has eyes. And Pham Lang, his name was not on the golden board. People rumored that he lacked a bit of luck. His final essay did not satisfy the chief examiner. Some also said that, due to the influence of the case in his wife's family, the mandarins were secretly wary, not wanting to choose a son from a family that had been involved in human lives. After hearing the news, Njok Lang had a severe headache. Mrs. Cook cried bitterly, blaming the heavens for not seeing Pham Lang. Although disappointed, when he returned to the village, heard the news that Levan had passed the exam with high scores, he sighed inwardly. He was not jealous. He only felt sad because he knew he had chosen the wrong wife. The girl who had quietly given him a bowl of rice in the midst of hunger was now the wife of the first-ranking scholar. 2 days later, when the court issued the invitation to return home in glory, Njoko received an edict allowing her husband to ride a horse back to the village, escorted by soldiers, drums and gongs leading the way, and a pink palanquin to welcome him. Mr. Keem stood in the yard looking towards the village entrance. There, Levan, the son-in-law he had once despised, rode his horse proudly into the village gate. The procession stopped in front of the Tran family's ancestral hall. Levan stepped down, clasped his hands respectfully before his father-in-law. "Father, I'm back." Njok Ho bowed his head. "Do you regret it, Father?" Mr. Keem was moved, 2 lines of tears silently flowing down. He bowed deeply to the young couple. "I am ashamed. Thank you too for showing me what knowledge is." The atmosphere in Mrs. Cook's house that day was no different from a funeral. She sat in front of the family altar, scratching her head, muttering like a lost soul, "Oh my God, why is this happening? My son studied properly, his head full of knowledge, yet he lost to that beggar disguised as a student." Njok Lang sat in a corner, her face pale, her eyes lifeless. She had once been proud to be the daughter-in-law of the family, the person that the whole Dongsha village expected to pass the exam with high scores, bringing glory to the family. But now, the winner was her younger sister who she had despised, and her husband was just a loser who had to write for hire and sell his writing to earn a living. Pham Lang walked into the house, looked at his wife and mother, feeling both sad and humiliated, but he did not blame them. The failure was his fault. "I'm sorry, Mum, Lang. It was my fault for being careless." Mrs. Cook turned around, her voice full of bitterness. "Subjective. Why didn't you say it was useless? Knowing that, I would have married you to the daughter of the scholar from the neighboring village. At least you would have been able to get a proper education and live in peace. This kind of person who comes back empty-handed like this, how can he raise his face?" Njok Lang bit her lip, unable to utter a word. Her hands clenched her shirt, silently calculating. The path to becoming an official was gone, so would her remaining status and assets be enough to hold on to her life? Meanwhile, Njok Ho's family was like having a festival. Since Levan passed the imperial examination, people came and went to visit and congratulate him endlessly. The villagers all called Njok Ho the Lady of the Imperial Examination with admiring eyes. One afternoon, while cleaning the desk with her husband to prepare for the day of his inauguration as district chief, Njok turned to whisper, "My dear, the people of Dongsha village were once exploited by the tyrants. When you take office, can you help the villagers?" Levan held his wife's hand, his eyes sincere. "Don't worry, I am grateful to this land. I owe you my whole life. Whether I am a high or low official, I will never let the people suffer." The day came when Levan and Ngokho packed up and took office. The whole Dongsha village saw them off with the sound of drums and gongs. Many elderly people cried with joy. An old woman said, "Heaven really has eyes." The abandoned girl is now the wife of the district magistrate. The guy who was despised as a beggar is now the top scholar. Karma really does exist. As for Pham Lang, after his failure, he began to live a secluded life. He no longer went to the village temple to read books, and no one asked him to write parallel sentences. In no time, the villagers also forgot that he was once their number one hope. Ngok Lang became increasingly indifferent. Mrs. Cook only wanted to marry her daughter to someone with more power, and even started aiming for the position of new district chief of the neighboring district. Pham Lang quietly left the village, leaving behind a short letter. "This body is not made of wood or stone, but my will cannot stay forever in a place where people despise me. Lang asked to go far away to make a living, and if I return one day and become famous, I hope it will no longer be a burden." At that time Njoko was sitting on the porch embroidering clothes for her husband, her hair neatly tied up, her face rosy, her eyes bright. Although life was not luxurious, the place where she and her husband lived at that time was cleaner, warmer, and tidier than any big house that had servants. That as soon as she saw Njok Lang vented her anger. "I ask you honestly, when did you start planning this? How did you meet Levan? Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Or did you deliberately act that act to embarrass me?" Njok remained calm and replied gently, "You asked as if I were the mastermind behind your fate. But it wasn't me who tricked you into marrying a man who didn't know how to do business, nor did I tell you to forget to learn embroidery, so that you would become a daughter-in-law and not know how to take care of your family." Njok Lang blushed, angry. "Don't act moralistic. Aren't you an abandoned child? Yet now you're sitting in a hammock with a parasol, having a husband who is a district magistrate, respected by the world. If you're good, then return that good fortune." Njok smiled, still busy embroidering each stitch. "I'm poor, but I know how to love people. I'm not well educated, but I'm diligent. I've been rejected, but I've never held a grudge against anyone. Tell me, if I hadn't brought food to Van that day, would he still be alive? If I didn't dare to step out of my prejudice, would I have had a chance to change my life? As for you, you had everything since you were young: education, beautiful, clothes, loved by your parents, married into an educated family, and now you blame me." That sentence seemed to stab straight into Njok Lang's pride. She stood up abruptly, hissing, "Don't think you're better than others. I'll let you know, no one can win forever." Then she turned and left, leaving Njoko's sad, distant eyes following her. In the distance, Levan walked in from the back garden, put down the basket of vegetables, and looked at his wife worriedly. Lang came to cause trouble again. Njoko's side nodded slightly. "I'm just afraid. When people no longer see each other with affection, then everything will go beyond harsh words. Is it possible that the old resentment has not yet dissipated, and now it has returned to take revenge on those who were involved?" Levan solemnly said, "Ho, do you think this matter is a lingering consequence of your mother's unjust death?" Njoko clenched her hands. "I don't know. But if it is true that there is a vengeance, then the district chief is you. The next person could be us. The story tells about the ironic fate of Njoko, the abandoned daughter of a noble family. Considered an illegitimate child, she was forced to marry the rich old man Mao, but she thought of a way to choose a husband by choosing a son-in-law at the alley entrance, and chose Levan, a poor but talented student. Overcoming many challenges and injustices, the two became husband and wife, living together with love and the will to rise. Levan later passed the imperial examination, was appointed district chief, and Njok went from a lowly status to a lady official, living a full and fulfilling life. On the contrary, Njok Lang, the sister who lived in wealth but was selfish and scheming, eventually had to bear the consequences, living in humiliation, being abused by her mother-in-law, and being ignored by her husband. Mr. Kim, the father who blindly believed Mrs. Zhuang's words and abandoned his biological child, only realized at the end of his life who was truly his blood. leaving all his assets to Enjoko as a belated apology. As for Mrs. Zhuang, the cruel woman finally had to pay with her life for the evil karma she caused. Thus, the bittersweet story of Mr. Kim's family has come to an end. Those who live with a good heart and love will be rewarded. Those who sow evil will sooner or later reap retribution. That is the law of cause and effect. That is never wrong. Thank you for accompanying us until the last minute of the story. If you feel touched, or have ever felt sorry for Enjako's fate, don't forget to like and share this video. See you in the next video. Goodbye.